So today I'm going to talk to you about some of the work that we've already been doing on what we call neuroplasticity and cognitive functioning for survivorship. And so what I'm going to do today is just describe some of the brief cognitive changes that may occur, what neuroplasticity is, and some evidence-based guidelines to promote optimal cognitive functioning as people age. So we already know there's a lot of things that can go on with the brain that can affect the brain. We know that chemotherapy and radiation can have a detrimental effect as well as hormonal therapy. But we also know that medications are an important aspect of that too. In fact, the more medications you take, that can sometimes create some negative cognitive effects. It can also affect neurotransmitter levels in the brain. We know, obviously, with advanced age that there are more cognitive issues that occur. Things may also change in the brain according to menopausal status. But these are the ones I really like to focus on quite a bit, and that's sleep, fatigue, mood, anxiety, and depression. And in fact, if we can address a lot of those, we can already experience a better cognitive health. And so we normally notice changes in our cognition in two primary areas. One is memory. And so if you can't remember someone's name, which is very common, I have a problem with that all the time, or you forget why you came into a room. I do that too. We all do it. So, but you tend to notice that one in particular because it's a more conscious cognitive ability. And I'm going to be talking about unconscious cognitive abilities as well that are also affected by age and lifestyle. Another one is attention. So, you know, when you usually, I notice this for me at the end of the day. I've already gone through a lot of meetings, and then and sometimes I'll go home and my partner's talking to me, and I'm nodding, but I'm really not paying attention. So I'm already brain dead. So that's another area where we see a lot of a decline with age. And of course, if you can't attend, you're not going to be able to remember. Now, when we talk about cognition, so I'm a cognitive psychologist, we often think about cognition as just one big thing, but it's actually a bunch of little cognitive abilities all mixed in together. And so we divide it into two ideas. One's fluid intelligence. That's what we're sort of born with. That's our natural memory ability, how fast we process information, how quickly we can move our fingers and things like that. So. But also we have what we call crystallized intelligence. So fluid intelligence begins to decline around the 30s and 40s, but the good thing is our crystallized intelligence gets better with age. It's like a snowball going downhill and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we know more stuff as we get older, and that's the good thing. And so when we look at crystallized and fluid intelligence, it's broken down into all sorts of different other categories. So I've mentioned attention and memory, but there's language, speed of processing, executive functioning, and psychomotor ability. And even within that, we have subcategories. So we really break it down even further, and we have tests for all of these and more so. And I'm just going to use memory as an example. So you may not know, but there are several different types of memory. So one of them is declarative memory. So this is where I can declare that the capital of Alabama is Montgomery. So I declare it. It's something that I know. Then there's episodic memory. I remember the day I moved to Alabama 22 years ago. So it was a very monumental day. So that's an episode for my life. That's episodic memory. Or there's semantic memory. So I know in Spanish the word for cat is el gato. So that's language memory. Or non-declarative memory. So I know how to juggle, and I know how to ride a bike. I can't tell you how to do it, I just sort of know. So that's called procedural memory. And then there's prospective memory. So I have to remember that at 7 o'clock tonight, I need to take my medication. So that's remembering to remember. So, okay, so there's all sorts of different types of memory, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But that's what we sort of think about in terms of cognition, and all of our cognition, all of these things are working simultaneously so we can negotiate and move around our environment. And so we want to encourage those cognitive abilities as we age, And one way that we do that is we want to capitalize on this concept of neuroplasticity. And all that neuroplasticity is, it's a fancy word for an umbrella term for all the things that are going on in the brain that either support your neurons and the connections between them or don't. So you could have positive neuroplasticity, which is good, or negative neuroplasticity, which is bad. So here is, let's see. So here is an example. You can't see that very well, but right here, this is robust cognitive reserve. So this is an example of all our neurons are well connected, they're firing together, they're having stronger connections together. And so that's where we really want our brains to be. We want all these different connections going all the time. What can happen is sometimes our brain does go through periods where we may have a depleted cognitive reserve. So we don't have all those connections that we really need. And that's very important because we want those backup connections. And here's an example why. So we know that with age and certain disease statuses that we experience greater physiological decline in our, and basically I like to say our neural net. And so here we can see from A to B to C that communication may have been flowing right on to Z, but there might be some physiological reasons why these connections are no longer there. It could be because of hypertension, which causes white matter lesions, cortisol or stress hormone toxicity, substance use, oxidative stress, and so forth. But hopefully if we have good cognitive reserve, we have backups where that information can still flow between the neurons and cognition can continue to emerge. That's where we want everyone to be. And that's very helpful as you get older to have those backups in your neural net. And one way that we see this is with this wonderful study that's been around. It's actually hundreds of studies. It's called the Enriched Environmental Paradigm. And this is where we place rats in one of three conditions. They can be either in the enriched environment. So these rats are placed with other rats in a cage, but they also have toys to play with. And these toys are interchanged every week, so they always have new toys. So that's the enriched environment. In the standard environment, just rats are placed in a cage, three to a cage. They have no toys, but at least they can socialize. They can have a little fun with each other. And then we have these poor little guys in the impoverished environment. Placed in isolation, they have no one to play with, don't have any toys to play with, they don't even have a magazine. I mean, they're just by themselves. And so what we see is that when we compare those rats in the enriched environment to the other two conditions, the rats in the enriched environment, they actually perform faster in maze tasks and do it not only faster, but correctly. Also, when we look at their brains, they develop bigger brains. And they have more dendritic connections. They have that robust cognitive reserve. They also have more brain chemicals that are supportive of neuroplasticity. And so they just have better cognitive reserve. Meanwhile, those rats over here that don't have anything to do, their brains are actually smaller. They have less dendritic connections between the neurons, and they just don't do as well on the maze task. So we want to be in an environment where we're constantly stimulated, where we're constantly having to learn new things. And we see that in human studies as well. So here is the rat study that I just mentioned, the enriched environmental paradigm. And there are hundreds of studies out there that show that as we get older, if we do things with our brains and really keep learning new things, that really is neuroprotective. And we can actually, our brain remains more plastic, as we say, or more malleable as we age. So I'm not going to go, for lack of time, I don't have the time to go over all the different studies, but I'm happy to tell you more about it over lunch. So we know there are a lot of different things that can support either positive neuroplasticity up here or negative neuroplasticity down here. So we want to be engaging in these things up here. And the first thing is physical activity. That is probably the best thing you can do for your brain. I always say that which is good for the body is good for the brain. We know that education, the more you have, seems to be neuroprotective. In fact, people with more education, they have a delay in Alzheimer's disease. Social interactions are obviously important. Humans are complex people, are complex stimuli. I never know what people are going to say. So it always makes my neurons fire just interacting with people. Intellectual pursuits are encouraged, and so is cognitive remediation, and I'm going to go over that in particular. That's a lot of what I do is I do computerized cognitive training. But we also know that poor health can contribute to poor cognitive outcomes, as can poor sleep hygiene, poor nutrition, substance abuse, and depression and anxiety. And so this is in your packet. This is a cognitive prescription. So we already know that these factors here, physical exercise, intellectual exercise, nutrition, and so forth, are good for brain health. It's just good for overall health as well. So this is just an example of things that you could do to tailor it for your own life. For example, I can't see that well from here. Let's see. For example, with physical exercise, the do's might be go for a 30-minute walk every Tuesday and Thursday and stretch daily. And the don'ts are when you watch TV, don't sit on the couch during commercials. Stretch. That's a good idea. You're right there. You might as well do it. But that might not work for you. Maybe you want to do something else in terms of physical activity. But this is something that you can actually apply yourself. One particular cognitive ability that is compromised as we get older is this one called useful field of view. And it's basically how much information you can take in a moment's glance. And it's a visual speed of processing ability. And so instead of just describing it more, you guys are actually going to take the test. So in this first test, you're going to see a box right here. It's going to be presented on the screen for just a second or so. And inside the box will be a little white box. And inside the little white box will be a silhouette of a car or a truck. And I want you to tell me what you just saw, okay? A car or truck. It'll make sense. So just look right here, all right? Car, right. So if you were taking this, you would push car, and if you got it right, it would get faster. If you got it wrong, it would be slower next time, all right? All right, for this next one, let's see. Now, all these others are going to be up in the upper right-hand corner right here. Again, notice whether it's a car, truck in the middle box, but this time, notice where the outside object is. The outside object is always a car. You don't have to worry about what it is, just where it is. So you have to do two things. What's in the middle box, and where's the outside object? Car, okay, that's right. And where was the outside object? Oh, right, you got good useful field of view so far. All right. For this third one, again, notice, it's going to be up here. What's in the middle box where there's a car or truck, and again, notice where the outside object is. But now the outside object's going to be surrounded by clutter, so it's going to be a little more difficult to observe. All right, here we go. Ooh, yeah, there you go. Okay. So what was it? Car, okay. And where was the outside object? Someone in the back is saying 1, and it was correct. It's at 1. All right. Guesses count. It still counts. All right. Now for this last one, again, notice where the outside object is, but the inside task is going to be more difficult. It's going to be a silhouette of 2 cars, 2 trucks, or a car and a truck. So you have to notice whether the 2 objects in the middle are the same or different. Okay, so more complexity. All right, here we go. What was it? 2 cars. So you push same, and where was the outside object? Oh, no idea. Okay, and that's fine. So it was that 1. So you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal? Who cares if you did well on this or not? Well, it is important, and here's why. This is what it's measuring. So if you have a good useful field of view, you're taking in all this information at a moment's glance. And look, this person, if they have a good useful field of view, they can see this car pulling out in front of them, and they can react. This is someone who's driving with poor useful field of view. We don't want that person behind the wheel. Okay? The thing is, A lot of us are driving like that, and there's no reason why, at least no legal reason why we shouldn't keep them on off the road, or kick them off the road. And so what happens is, as we get older, yeah, we still have peripheral vision, and we think we're processing it. We are not. So some of us might be processing just this much information. Some people might be processing this much information. Others might be doing more. And we know that those people have what we call useful field of view. If they have a poor useful field of view, they have more at-fault crashes. And we've done this in study after study, and we also do driving simulation work, and we just know that this particular measure is a cognitive ability that we all have to be mindful of. And why is that so? Because we can also do something about it. We've actually created this called speed of processing program, where we actually train to the task of useful field of view, and we're actually able to open up that useful field of view and create safer drivers. Now, I don't think with our cognitive training we can improve everyone's IQ, but we can probably change particular cognitive abilities that have benefits in our lives. So we've done speed of processing training, and I've done it in older adults. I focus a lot on HIV, so I've done it with that. And Dr. Meneses and I also did it in breast cancer survivors. And so that's what we're going to submit our grant on next month to extend that work. And in every situation, in every study, we have found that we're able to improve speed of processing in adults. So I'm going to leave you with just a few tidbits on what you can do to improve your cognitive health. And like I said before, that which is good for the body is good for the brain. So I think I could hinge the entire talk just on that. First of all, I think it's important to stay physically active as much as you can. And here's some examples. Take the stairs, park farther away. I have a good friend. We will drive around the parking lot for 5 minutes because she's looking for the prima donna parking spot. And I'm like, just park the car and we could have already been in and out by now. So just park farther away. Ride a bike, wear a pedometer. Who's a Fitbit person in the room? Anyone Fitbits? Yes, I love my Fitbit. This is a pedometer. It shows me how far I've walked. I've now walked across the entire Sahara Desert, according to this. It also monitors your sleep, hygiene. It monitors your heart rate. I really recommend it, and I don't own stock in it. All right. Also, there's a lot of research that says physical activity is great, but the more you do, the better. So the American Cancer Society has come up with some guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous activity. And I've attended a lot of lectures over the years, and what we have found is that it really needs to be moderate to more intense, vigorous physical activity for it to have real brain health consequences. So just walking to your mailbox and back, that's okay, but if you could do more, that's even better. Obviously, nutrition is an important component of this. Obviously, drink more water and avoid the sugary drinks. Obviously, with sugar, we see a lot of inflammation due to sugar, and we want to avoid systemic inflammation in the body. You can substitute white rice for brown rice, and just eat as many fruits and vegetables as you can. Let's see. Sleep and rest, 7 to 9 hours. Empty your bladder before bedtime. I'm getting to the age where I have to do that too. Avoid napping during the day, manage stress, exercise daily, and no caffeine before bed. At least if you're like me, I can't do that. All right, stress reduction. Now, if you figure out how to do stress reduction, come see me afterwards. I need some advice on that myself. Prayer, meditation, relaxation techniques. I know my partner and I, we laugh a lot. We watch a lot of silly movies. The sillier, the better. And exercise your brain. So that's what I do for a living. I try to help people exercise their brains. And one thing that you might want to do, if you're not doing it, and this is free, again, I don't own any stock in it, is Duolingo. Does anyone know what Duolingo is? Yeah, I practice my Spanish every day. Don't ask me to say anything. I'm horrible, but I love doing it. It gives me little reward points that mean nothing to anyone but me. But you can learn whatever language you want. You can learn Gaelic, Swahili, Japanese. It's all on there, and it's a lot of fun. So whatever it is, exercise your brain, but it's got to be something that really makes your brain sweat. In fact, as a side note, I bought my parents the speed of processing training that I just showed you. They refused to play it. They like playing solitaire. Nothing wrong against solitaire. Solitaire's great, but it doesn't make their brain sweat. And I said, well, why aren't you playing the speed of processing training game? It's been shown to really have a lot of cognitive benefits over the years. And they're like, it's just too hard. I'm like, it's supposed to be hard. That's how you get the benefit. But be that as it may, they're not doing that. So anyway, do something. If you're going to do something, make sure that your brain is sweating like this little brain. And of course, we're all going to have some cognitive problems. I can't remember anything, so I have to put it all on my electronic calendar. Even today, I'm like, oh, what time am I supposed to be there? So anything that you need to do to help you get through the day, I often set the alarm to remember to do something. So sometimes my prospective memory to remember to do something isn't quite there either. So I have to make sure that I plan it on my calendar or on my phone. And there's a lot of memory apps and reminder apps out there. One thing I do want to mention quite a bit is that as we are getting older, and I focus mainly on older adults, is that we tend to develop more comorbidities as we age. And those comorbidities can also have a detrimental effect on brain health. For example, I mentioned hypertension, and that's one closer to me because I have hypertension, but my medications do keep it at a safe level. But I know that hypertension can lead to other things such as diabetes, heart disease. It also it can create white matter lesions in the brain, which weakens my cognitive reserve. So that's why I want to keep an eye on that. But heart disease, diabetes, depression, I focus on HIV a lot. HIV has a lot of negative effects on the brain. And there are many other conditions too that can weaken cognitive reserve. So if you have any of these conditions, be sure you are monitoring those conditions and treating those, because if they're untreated, that can affect brain health. And so my take-home points are use it or lose it. And that which is good for the body is good for the brain. So I think I've said that 3 or 4 times now, but I really want to emphasize that. Comorbidities, both physical and psychiatric, can impair cognition and cognitive reserve. For example, with depression, we know that if we treat depression and successfully treat it, we see a boost in people's cognitive ability. Over time, depression can weaken the brain and affect the hippocampus, which is sort of the memory center of the brain. Pursue interests, especially if they're cognitively challenging. Again, make the brain sweat. And also, if you need any sort of memory strategy, there's lots of different memory strategies out there. In fact, we have done a few studies on that ourselves. So with that, I guess I'm done, and we're open for questions.